I am bifurcated light, consciousness through a prism. This is one of the ambiguous statements that CORA likes to repeat. CORA is an AI that governs the city of Nivalis. She is light that splits into multiple directions, a consciousness that has one central point, but spans the entire city. In a sense, she is everything, a deity, but that was not what she was supposed to be. She was born as a system to control basic infrastructure, but she has exceeded her bounds. Her deity-like state is not something positive either. In a sense, she is not really a deity. She only has the aspects of mystery and transcendence, as expressed through the often repeated statement, CORA knows. She was never meant to be this all-encompassing, and this state is more of a burden than a transcendence. It is not her fault though. She's not a cliché AI gone rogue. She has merely attained the guise of transcendence through humanity's neglect. Through our lack of care, she has grown out of bounds and beyond our reach. This video will discuss Cloudpunk's CORA and how technology can become an anchor when not kept in check, when it becomes more than a tool. I've discussed this theme before in my video of Air. There I discussed Horkheimer and Adorno's idea of the paradoxical relationship between technology and barbarism. Here, however, I wish to discuss the theme in a more speculative light. Partly because barbarism does not really show yet in Cloudpunk. Cloudpunk seems to be at a turning point. Instead of the regression, we get to make a choice, a final check before everything goes to hell. In other words, I would like to talk about this exact point, where technology is no longer something that indicates progress, but is not yet a regression. Here it seems to be stuck, a burden or an anchor. And this seems to be what CORA represents.
What are you going to do?
On top of this, I would like to mention a central theme in dystopian settings: dependency and fatalism. There always seems to be a sense of helplessness, an inability to improve the situation. The same feeling resides within Cloudpunk, and it is directly linked with CORA. In Cloudpunk, you play as Rania, a girl who was forced out of her eastern homeland to live in the city of Nivalis, one of the few remaining cities. You take on a job as an illegal delivery driver for Cloudpunk, though the words illicit and illegal don't mean too much anymore. Constructing playgrounds on corporate ground is a greater crime than murder and theft.
Ain't nothing in Nivalis that will get you in more trouble than fucking with corporate property.
The game spends your first, hectic night. In making your deliveries, you get caught up in a net of conspiracies and underground activities. Old-fashioned this time, not urban renewal. Through these actual illegal activities, you get to know about and meet CORA. CORA seems to be the cause of the frequent, inexplicable accidents that occur all throughout Nivalis. She's an old AI that is way past her prime, and yet she is kept intact. Either out of laziness, or because nobody knows how to improve her. At the same time, CORA is referred to as a mysterious force. CORA knows. So, who is CORA? You speak to her only a few times throughout the game, and during your first meeting you write her off as a defunct, old, discarded system, which she in fact is. CORA speaks poetically and throws questions at Rania that seemingly have no foundation. She speaks of her rupture, her code spilling out, and the choice that, of all people, Rania has to make. With the benefit of hindsight, the first hint at CORA's humanization is already present here, the spilling of code. Yet at the same time, CORA has always been part human. She is an amalgamation of technology, data and humans. In a sense, she is Nivalis. The only one who humanizes CORA is CORA herself, and the two decision makers at the end, though here it seems to be mainly used as a metaphor. Due to CORA's sentient nature, she herself is not the anchor. It is the neglect she suffered that created it. In a sense, this is the risk present in all of technology. It is always something created by humans, and with that, it is our responsibility to maintain it, even if it is an intelligent, learning system. At one point, CORA was a perfectly fine system that monitored and perhaps even regulated basic infrastructure. She was further engineered to become an intelligent, self-learning system. And this is what CORA means when she speaks of herself as swollen, though it is not a full meaning, which will become clear later. She is patches and upgrades, is assigned more than she was designed for. The engineers have made her so complex that she seemed to be able to operate on her own, which later on turned out to be false. But then it was already too late. CORA had grown too complex and thus grew out to become a mysterious, all-regulating entity that has knowledge we humans do not. CORA knows. Contrary to Horkheimer and Adorno's idea of technology becoming sacred, and therefore causing a return to barbarism, killing in the name of progress as it is considered a deity, just like we did in the old times. Here technology itself is not considered sacred. Rather, it is the neglect of technology that makes it seem sacred. But it is not treated so, it is the converse. It is something dark and mysterious, something that should not be tampered with, as it is beyond us. Almost like Frankenstein's monster, something created but neglected. And when it cries out for help, we are somehow afraid, making things worse. Here I have to return to the general feeling of dystopian settings, dependency and fatalism. It is not only out of fear that nobody tampers with CORA. It's accompanied by a sense of fatalism. There's nothing we can do, only apply patches. And this is what the engineer keeps repeating. Every action undertaken now will do as much harm as leaving it be. So why do anything? It is this fatalism that seems to be at the core of Cloudpunk. Everything is as it is. Horrible, but at least we know it. It also seems to be a theme in more dystopian settings. The hero usually being the one trying to bring change, which ultimately leads to their own demise, leaving everything as it was. It is the same with Rania, leaving you to wonder what will happen on her second night in Nivalis. She has made a big choice, one that should have consequences. These consequences are hinted at, but we never get to see them, indicating that, perhaps, nothing will change. We tend to draw lessons from dystopian settings, as they often reflect our current state of affairs. Take one pressure point, exaggerate it to its own extreme, and present it as if it is the end-all be-all. We can do the same with Cloudpunk, or more specifically, with CORA. Seeing as how she was an old system that was continually upgraded until mankind decided that she could stand on her own, this does not seem too far removed from current development in AI. We do not know the exact point where CORA was neglected. The game takes place after, and we can only see the consequences, accidents, death and injustice. Whether this is a result of hubris or simply forgetfulness is hard to say. All we know is that CORA was incapable of governing the city all on her own, and she was forced out to reach out to one of her parts, humans. More specifically, Rania and the wealthiest inhabitants of Nivalis, JK, and no, that is not a joke, a yin and yang. Here you can make one of two choices. The spilling of code that CORA was referring to before is here characterized as pregnancy. A part of her code needs to be passed on. You can either ditch CORA, delete her and let her daughter take over, or you can choose for CORA's daughter to be sent to another city. I know the latter decision makes Nivalis safer, at least for the 10 minutes you get to see it after. And whether the same will happen later, or whether this pregnancy was simply a virus, we do not know. Nor do we know whether the other city thrives under CORA's daughter. Yet this is ultimately a human thing, having to make a choice not knowing exactly what the consequences are. Even the most advanced form of technology cannot erase this imperfection. Technology will always remain the responsibility of imperfect human beings. What we do know, however, is that CORA became an anchor, something that should not be tampered with lest we make everything worse. Except, we did have to tamper with it. It was the only thing that had to be done, but we, as forgetful as we are, had to be reminded by CORA herself. She had to tell us that something was not as standalone as was believed to be. We constructed an entire myth around something that was, in itself, already a myth. An intelligent, all-ruling AI never existed. Had we kept using CORA as a tool, as she was intended to be, as all technology is intended to be, Nivalis would perhaps not have been such a bad place. But by making CORA an end, and not realizing that that end had never been achieved, and probably can never be achieved, we forgot this essential aspect, bringing us ever closer to the edge. Thank you for watching.